Hello, it's Penny here. Welcome to another reading vlog. So, it's a really horrible rainy night tonight, but I wanted to start this anyway. Hopefully you can't hear too much of the rain, but possibly I'll be doing a bunch of reading tonight since it's a horrible raining night. And I wanted to update you before I get too far into the things that I'm reading. So the main focus I have for this week's reading is going to be the Murderbot series. I just got a Kobo last week, so I'm excited to be able to read it all on my Kobo because I have it all from the library, which is the main reason I got my Kobo, because in New Zealand it's the only way to read library books on an e-reader. So I have actually already started All Systems Read, the first Murderbot book, and I'll admit, so I had read the first chapter of Murderbot multiple times. Like I keep thinking, or at least I keep being in a situation where I can only read ebooks, and I've had the first book on ebook available to me for a long time, and I keep reading the first chapter and then realizing I just don't want to commit to picking up new series. However, I've been doing really well at catching up on all the series I have in progress, and now I'm allowing myself to start some new ones, which means I really have to get to Murderbot because I love it. So all I really know about the series so far is we're following this Murderbot. It's a robot with some kind of organic components, and they work as security, kind of in a world where people are going out and like colonizing new planets. And Murderbot is just working as security. However, Murderbot really has no commitment to their job. All they really want to be doing is sitting in their little cubicle watching TV and listening to music and just consuming all sorts of media. They're also really anxious whenever they have to deal with the humans, but also still seem to be quite good at their job. So, very relatable character, and just the way that it's written is such a joy to read. So I'm expecting to really love this. I don't know how far through the series I'm going to get, but I think I actually have most of the series from the library now. I don't know, I haven't been keeping proper track of all my holds as they come through, but I think I might have the whole series, but I also don't know whether I'm actually going to have the time to get to the whole series. It just depends how fast I'm reading things. We are now going to be moving house, but it's still 6 weeks away, so there's things that need to be done, but also like we still have to wait to do a lot of things. So I honestly don't know how much reading time or reading brain power I'm going to have, but this also doesn't seem like something that should be too mentally stretching, which is good. The other thing that I'm reading is my audiobook, so I always have to have an audiobook on the go, and I went for a run this morning and started Clean Sweep by Ilona Andrews. So yes, another series, and this is another series that I'm expecting to love. Ilona Andrews is an author that I really have enjoyed everything I've read by before, so I really love the Kate Daniels series, and I've also read Hidden Legacy by them that I loved, and maybe a few other random things along the way. But now I'm getting to Clean Sweep. So what I know about the series is it's some kind of fantasy sci-fi. It's a world where there are these inns, and sometimes, or like these inns are specialized in intergalactic travelers, all these like supernatural type creatures that come from other planets, and they stay on Earth without people really realizing what they are, and a lot of them are very dangerous in the way that you might expect supernatural creatures to be. So we're following this one woman whose job is she's an innkeeper, but that seems to be that she also has a bunch of magical powers in order to protect the inn and these creatures that are staying with her. So she has one woman staying with her at the moment, this older woman who seems to be really into eating humans, although she's not doing that at the moment. And also like the inn itself has some kind of powers. So I was warned before I picked this up that there is some animal cruelty, and it does actually open to the idea that these dogs in the neighborhood are being killed, and there are some quite graphic descriptions of how they've been killed, so I'm glad I was prepared for that. But I also think you can see Ilona Andrews' like love of animals. I know they have dogs themselves because it's a husband and wife writing duo, so it doesn't feel too gratuitous, but it's definitely still not nice to read. I'm only a few chapters in, but so far she has kind of encountered a monster that she thinks is responsible, but it seems like there's some bigger things going on as well. It isn't too long, the first book, or the audiobook is only, I think, like 7 hours something, and I'm listening to it at 2 times speed because the audiobook narrator is quite slow. So I'm hoping I should be able to get through that this week as well. And then I guess we'll see what else happens. Hello! So it is another late night update because I have just been really bad this week at getting to video stuff during the day. But here we are. I also wasn't doing very well at reading for a few days there, so it's been a little bit. But the last day or so, I have suddenly done a whole bunch. I found with the first Murderbot book, All Systems Red, it took me a while to kind of get through the first half, and then I kind of just blasted through the rest of that, and also through the first half of Artificial Condition, which is the next book in the series. And I don't actually think that's anything to do with the books. I think that's just to do with life being a distraction. Or is it the book that's the distraction? One of those. Anyway, All Systems Red, as expected, I ended up really loving it. I kind of think it's a bit strange because there is this plot where Murderbot is acting as security for this group of humans on this planet where they encounter kind of a dangerous situation, and Murderbot has to act as security, which they actually turn out to be pretty good at, despite the fact that they're not that interested in their job and they just want to be watching TV. So there is a plot around dealing with this dangerous situation, and even though there is a lot of that plot in the story, and it's only a short story, there's kind of important pieces of that plot that are just like completely missing because they're not really important for the story of Murderbot kind of interacting with these humans. So kind of the plot that you might think is the plot is not really the plot. The plot is more about the fact that these humans that Murderbot is working for are treating Murderbot as kind of human, and Murderbot is very uncomfortable with that. So the story is more about Murderbot's emotions around interacting with humans and being human maybe, or having some kind of human elements. And it's really interesting, but I think still just the best bits are Murderbot's social anxiety and the way that they deal with it, and as well, like, the bond that they're kind of forming with these humans. Like, honestly, every time Murderbot refers to the humans as my humans, so heartwarming. And there's one particular human that has kind of a better approach to interacting with Murderbot that Murderbot really appreciates, and I think I love that human as well. However, then moving into Artificial Condition, the first half, I think I've just gotten into a bit with some more humans, but the first half of that is just entirely Murderbot getting on the spaceship and interacting with the AI, I guess, that runs the spaceship. And honestly, it's mostly just Murderbot and the spaceship having a conversation about things. And there's a bit of a mystery in Murderbot's past that Murderbot wants to go and investigate. But just Murderbot and the spaceship having a conversation, I really loved it. There's just so many interesting ideas in the story, and the characters, it's so great how Martha Wells has managed to like humanize these characters that are clearly not human at all. So I'm hoping I can finish Artificial Condition tonight, maybe, because I haven't got that much more to go, and I am really interested to see what we learn about this mystery in Murderbot's past. So then the other thing that I have managed to finish is Clean Sweep by Ilona Andrews. It turned out that I pumped the audiobook up a little bit more, not because I wasn't enjoying it. Often when I pump the audiobook up, it's because I'm not enjoying it. But in this case, it was because the audiobook narrator was just really slow. It's kind of like this, I don't know, like a southern drawl, perhaps. I'm not an expert in American accents, but it's quite slowly spoken. And so I was able to speed it up quite a lot. And I felt like because Ilona Andrews' writing is often quite action-packed, and so the slowest pace just wasn't doing it for me, so speeding it up for me seemed to suit the story a lot better. So then I was able to just get through it like so fast, and I just had a really great time with it. I just think the way that Ilona Andrews does world building is something I enjoy so much. They kind of take these classic supernatural paranormal tropes like shapeshifters and vampires and give them like a more scientific or like logical explanation, and it's just such an interesting take on some classic ideas. And at the same time, the stories are like so fun. I feel like I really have to contrast this to the Mistborn Era 2 books that I was reading in my last vlog, because those I was really criticizing the humor and I was bored for a lot of the action. But the way that Ilona Andrews does humor and action just gels so much better for me, and I was having so much more fun, and I felt like the humor fit with the story rather than distracting from it. But at the same time, I will say this first story really just felt like an introduction to the world and kind of some of the bigger dramas that Dina's the main character. Kind of just an introduction to the bigger mysteries going on with what happened with her parents and kind of just setting up where she fits in this magical world. There is also kind of a love triangle set up between a werewolf and a vampire, but given what I know of Ilona Andrews from their previous books, especially like the Kate Daniels books, the actual love interest is the werewolf, right? I'm sure of it. But I also know Ilona Andrews tends to be pretty good at like a slow burn setup. So I'm quite happy for it to take several books for that to really get going. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with that. I do think, though, I'm going to keep reading Murderbot books. So the next audiobook I'm going to pick up is going to be, I'm going to go back to The Law of Becoming, the 4th book in the Jaren series by Kate Elliott. Now, I've talked about this a million times on my vlog and never finished it. So I'm not going to try and give you a synopsis. It's a crazy fantasy sci-fi. The first books were more like romanticities. The later books are very confusing because Kate Elliott's kind of just followed every character thread and now it's all over the place. And really there's only one character's story that I'm particularly interested in at the moment. But I have also pumped up the speed of that one, so I'm hoping I can get through it in maybe just one run tomorrow. Maybe not quite, but let's see. Okay, so this is not another late night update, but it may as well be because it's so dark and stormy that it is pretty much like nighttime. But anyway, I did just finish Rogue Protocols. Rogue Protocol? Protocol. English is hard. Anyway, I finished the 3rd Murderbot book, so I wanted to update you because the ending had me feeling really emotional. I do think the last time I updated you, I was only halfway through the 2nd book, Artificial Condition. I can say that one. And I think actually for Artificial Condition, even though the end was still good, I preferred the first half where we didn't have any humans around. Pretty much, whenever Murderbot is around humans, they can't help but try to protect them. And it's adorable, and Murderbot's constantly annoyed by this urge they have to protect people. And I think the story is good and the action is good, but I'm mostly interested in these concepts of different kind of like non-human entities like living their lives, and just the way that these non-human bots are interacting with each other. Just the whole thing is really interesting, which is why I love the 3rd book so much. So in the 3rd book, Murderbot has gone to investigate something that they feel like needs investigating, and they come across this group of humans, and one of these humans has like a bot pet, so like a human shaped bot, but it's kind of like a companion. But Murderbot like kind of looks at it with derision, like, oh, they're keeping a bot as a pet, and doesn't think much of the bot. And the bot is the most pure, adorable robot I've ever read from, and just wants to be everyone's friend and is so trusting and caring, and just everything about the way that Murderbot and this adorable bot Mickey, the way that they're communicating with each other, and just the whole situation was so heartwarming, but then also emotional in other ways. It's kind of like the whole Grumpy Sunshine dynamic, and I really loved it. There is also like this whole action plot involved around this investigation that Murderbot's trying to do, and it's so interesting the way that in each of these stories there is like an action thing happening, and those parts of the story are good, but also they're not the most interesting thing in the books. Like in the 3rd book, there's again like the big adventurous climax that the humans are all really focused on, like, oh, we did this big heroic thing. And Murderbot's not really even paying attention to the fact that the humans are doing that. They're just like focusing on something else entirely. So the summary is, I'm really enjoying Murderbot, and I'm now kind of getting some momentum on it, which is good because I'm now up to exit strategy, which I think is the longest. You know, maybe that's not true. Let me look this up. Yes, it is actually the longest of the Murderbot books so far. So I'm going to start exit strategy. I suspect that I'm going to end this vlog once I've finished exit strategy, just because of timing things. And I've also heard that it's kind of, to some degree, wrapping up the story of these things that Murderbot's been investigating. So it's probably a good place to stop before I get too, like, I don't know, overwhelmed by Murderbot, or more like I start blurring all the stories together into one. And I'd like to read the later stories, which I think are a little bit more separate, try and read them a little bit separately from this first 4 so that it doesn't blur together in my head. But hopefully I can get through the 4th book fairly quickly. We will see. I know I said that we still have like 6 weeks, 5 weeks now till we move, and so we don't really need to start packing things up, but we have started packing some things up. Here's some boxes of books over here, and there's actually another box behind me, and I might box up some more just because we are thinking of taking some boxes down to a family member that lives about halfway next week. And also, even though like I don't want to live in a room full of boxes for a month, I'd also just like to know that it's done. So I guess that's what we're doing. And also, like, if this is all done, then I can focus on the other things outside of my library that also need packing up when we get closer to actually moving. Anyway, that's not really relevant, except that boxing up and moving things is kind of the main thing I'm doing other than reading at the moment for the next little bit. I don't know if the weather keeps being this awful. Maybe we'll do more reading. Oh, I did also finish some audiobooks since I last talked to you. So I finally managed to finish The Law of Becoming, the last Jaren book. I have to say, I was listening to this on my run, and when it got to where it said epilogue, I was like, what the fuck? Because the ending was so not ending like, and I'm not really surprised because Kate Elliott's really set up all these different characters in different positions, and there's a lot of really interesting ideas that she's explored but not really gone anywhere with. And so it kind of just sets a bunch of stuff up, and there's so many different things going on that it's almost impossible that she could have ever wrapped that up at that point. And it's kind of similar to the Crown of Stars series, is it here? I think so. Her other series that I read, the ending, because the whole series just got so sprawling, there's just too much to ever possibly wrap it up in a satisfying way. But I still feel like it was valuable to read for the ideas, even if I feel like she could have taken the ideas a lot further. So I'm glad I read it. I'm glad I finally finished it. It's such a strange series because it kind of starts out as like fantasy romance with a sci-fi element to it. The ending is not that at all. It's almost like a political sci-fi with some weird like existential elements to it. Anyway, as I said, I have no idea who I would recommend that book to, or that book series to, but I have finished that. And then I did, since I needed an audiobook, I started reading the next audiobook I need to get to because it's going to return itself to the library, and that is The Witch's Heart by Genevieve Gornichec. This is like a Norse mythology retelling of the wife of Loki, and basically it is just telling the story of her running away, living in the forest, and then this kind of romance with Loki that leads to her becoming the mother of monsters. So I'm finding it interesting from the perspective of learning about Norse mythology, although I also know, or at least I think, this has been built, the whole story has kind of been built off just like a tiny mention of Angrboda, Loki's wife, and the fact that she gave birth to these different monsters. So there's parts in there that you can tell are built off actual Norse mythology, and then a lot of it's also probably just been made up. It's okay. I'm finding it interesting, but I'm also not in love with it, if you know what I mean. But I think anyone with an interest in Norse mythology would still probably enjoy reading this, at least from an interest perspective. And I'm about halfway through that, so maybe I can finish that by the same time I finish Exit Strategy. Maybe that's delusional. Hello! So I have come to what I think is a pretty good stopping point in the Murderbot series, so the end of book 4, and I did actually also read this tiny little short story that goes after book 4. I think it's called Home. But so the 4th book, Exit Strategy. I think this wasn't my favorite. My favorite parts with Murderbot is Murderbot's internal dialogue, and especially when Murderbot was interacting with other bots, mostly at the asshole research transport and also Mickey. Some of the others were still interesting as well, even though they're very, I don't know, like personality light. So then in Exit Strategy, what's kind of happening is it's coming full circle, and Murderbot is back with the humans from the first book, and it really does wrap up a lot of the things and a lot of the conspiracies or dramas that were happening in these first 4 novellas. And while I do enjoy Murderbot's interactions with the humans, not as much as I enjoy just their general thoughts and their interactions with the other bots. And then as well, the action plot that was introduced in the 4th book, or that happened in the 4th book, was kind of much more important than the action in the other books. As I said, in the other books or the other novellas, it was more like the action was there, but the main story was about the relationships that Murderbot was dealing with. And even though the relationships were really important in the 4th book, it's almost like the action was more important. Sort of. The relationships were still important. So I did really like book 4, but maybe I think books 1 and 3 were better for me, and 2 and 4 were slightly less good, but still like 4 stars. Very enjoyable. One thing I will say is I have remembered now that there was an announcement that there's going to be a Murderbot TV show, and the idea is that Alexander Skarsgård is going to be playing Murderbot, which is really doing my head in when I've remembered that. Because I have seen, I don't think I mentioned this yet, but a lot of people who read the Murderbot books, if they listen to the audiobook, there's a male audiobook narrator, and so people who read that will often refer to Murderbot as he, and then people who read it physically, I've seen will often refer to Murderbot as their own gender. So going into this, I really wanted to remember or keep in mind that Murderbot was non-binary, and if anything referred to it as it, or maybe they, but I was purposely in my head not thinking of a gendered bot, because it's a bot, and Murderbot is very clear that they don't have any like gendered elements to their body, and they don't ever see themselves as a particular gender. So then when I try to imagine Murderbot being Alexander Skarsgård, he just seems too much of a man for me to feel like that's right. And I also really can't imagine Alexander Skarsgård acting like Murderbot. Like sometimes Murderbot is so petty and like a petulant teenager, and maybe if I think about Eric from True Blood, I can imagine him being a little bit like that, but just, I don't know, I honestly cannot see how they will do a lot of the elements of the Murderbot books for TV, because so much of it is inside Murderbot's head, and like a lot of the action scenes are them hacking other systems, or like the excitement is the fact that Murderbot has all these different inputs that they're dealing with at once. Like they can see through different drones, and they are getting different information from the different systems. Oops, my camera battery died. You know, Murderbot would have been able to like reroute some systems and sort that out. But I think I was going to say like a big part of the Murderbot books is that Murderbot hates making eye contact with people, and will often watch people or watch their own face through like the security cameras around them. And maybe that could be really interesting on TV, but I also just don't really know how it will come across. So I guess that's something to look forward to, or to be worried about. Oh, and the short story that I read, so it was from Mensa's perspective, Mensa being this character from the first book that is probably Murderbot's favorite human. And it was so short. It's really about Mensa's trauma after the events that they've been through, and how their relationship with Murderbot is helping them with that. But the ending was so abrupt just because of the way I was, I guess the zoom level of the ebook on my Kobo meant that the very last line was on the last line, like at the bottom of the page on my ebook, and then I went to the next page and it just said the end. So like I thought there was going to be more and there wasn't more, and I was quite shocked about it. So it's super short, doesn't really add anything, and of course it doesn't have Murderbot's sarcasm and just like way of dealing with everything that I think is really important for what makes the Murderbot books work. It's all about the tone and just their internal anxiety and the relatableness of all their thoughts. So I don't know when I'll be continuing the Murderbot series, but I'll try not to make it be too long. I don't know. We're moving though, as I said, so that could get in the way of all sorts of things. Although maybe I'll need some ebooks while we're moving around. Maybe it'll work out. We'll see. The other thing I have read since I last talked to you was The Witch's Heart, the Loki's wife retelling that I was telling you about, that I was listening to the audiobook of. So that, in the end, I think I liked it. I do wonder now though, maybe mythological retellings just aren't really for me. I always thought I liked them because I always enjoyed learning about different mythology, and I do. And that is the main thing that I got out of reading this. But I almost feel like it's frustrating when you read a retelling because you can't tell which things are part of the original myth and which things are things that have been introduced by the author. So it makes me want to go away and like do a bunch of research that I don't really have time to do right now. And then at the same time, the way that mythological retellings are often told, to me, doesn't feel as emotional as a full fantasy story, and it also doesn't have the same level of world building. Like, I think the kind of retellings I want is things where stories have been turned into full fantasy novels, like maybe like Daughter of the Forest by Juliet Marillier, which is like a fairy tale retelling type thing. That's the kind of retelling I want, but I think a lot of the retellings that we're getting at the moment are not really those kind of retellings. But I do still think it was really well written, and I enjoyed it. But I also don't really know that the story's gonna stick with me, if you know what I mean. I don't know. I would appreciate if you have any like retelling fairy tale or mythology type retellings that have that fully fleshed fantasy world and a lot of character development and emotion. If you have any recommendations for that, I would be quite interested. Anyway, I guess this is going to be the end of the vlog. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I read in this video and what you thought about them. I would love to chat with you about them down in the comments, or let me know if you've been reading anything great lately. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.